I'm here today with my friend Samer Sinijlawi, who is a Palestinian politician living in East Jerusalem. Good morning, Samer.
Good morning.
Morning. So just for people who don't know Samer, he is a member of Fatah, the ruling party of Palestinian politics in the West Bank. But Samer is a member of the opposition within Fatah that believes it needs to be reformed and modernized and with a new, younger leadership. Samer was born in the old city of Jerusalem and brought up in the Muslim quarter. He has lived in East Jerusalem all his life, the father of 8 children. The only time maybe he wasn't living in East Jerusalem was he was involved in the first Palestinian uprising or intifada in 1987 when he was just a teenager, 15 years old. And he was imprisoned for 5 years as a result of his involvement with the Intifada. He learned Hebrew in prison, self-taught in Hebrew and also in English, finished school after prison, then became the spokesperson of the prisoners for the Fatah International Community Youth Movement. He did a degree in business administration at Bir Zayt University near Ramallah, and he's now doing an MA in conflict resolution in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, which is, of course, one of the top Israeli universities also in Jerusalem. Samer and myself have met a few times recently, once at a conference in Europe and more recently at another conference in Tel Aviv. So I'm very happy that Samer is with me today. Lots to talk about. I should just point out one more thing that, well, I'll start also as a question with this, that Samer is somebody who, although he's still very much with Fatah, he very much has reached out to Israelis, even to American Jews, both left-wing, right-wing, secular, religious. In fact, I'll start with a question around that, Samer. I know that you went a couple of months ago to Kfar Aza, one of the places where the October 7th Hamas massacre in Israel was carried out. It's a kibbutz in southern Israel, and lots of people were murdered there, and also others were kidnapped. So it is relatively unusual for an East Jerusalem Fatah politician to go and pay respects there. How was that for you, Samer, and why did you feel the need to do that at all, actually?
Well, we are facing very difficult times, Tom, Palestinians and Israelis. And I have spent most of my life in outreaching Israelis. And I think it was a good investment because one of the common enemy for Palestinians and Israelis is ignorance. We simply don't know each other. And what I have discovered from my meetings with especially the political elite, the current political elite in Israel, that most of them have never met a Palestinian politician. They might have met some Palestinians in a grocery or gas station, but not in a very deep conversation about the conflict, while they are the ones who are deciding policies and strategies and taking decisions on everything related to this conflict on behalf of Israelis. And I met ministers like these. I met members of the Knesset like these. So I spent my whole life in meeting Israelis, and I meet every Israeli that would like to meet and accepts to meet, from the left, center, right. The more you understand the Israeli society, the more you start changing your vision, your strategy, your way of looking into this conflict. And one of the things I discovered, of course, I meet Palestinians every day. I'm a political activist, so I became one of very few, if not the only one, expert in both Palestinians and Israelis, who can understand the conflict from both sides. And it is a totally different conflict. when you look at it from Israeli lens, or you look at it from a Palestinian lens. And the thing is that we have reached in this conflict to a level that we don't draw any moral red lines anymore. Both sides, they have the same ethos. I discovered that just like Palestinians, Israelis believe they have a good cause, and both, since they have a good cause, believe they have a just fight, and then both believe they will win. We will win. And during 60 years or maybe a century in this conflict, both sides decided that maybe everything is permissible. We can do anything we want on the other side. And I don't agree. I think even if this conflict now doesn't look like to have a way out, although I believe now, even after the 7th of October, we are closer to a political exit, to a horizon than ever. But let's say that we are still far away. We should, both Palestinians and the Israelis, draw moral red lines. And I don't think that it is acceptable from a moral level, on even a religious level, on a national level, on ethical level, that we Palestinians could kill civilians on the 7th of October. And despite that, there is a lot of anger and grief and sadness, because the 7th of October killed 1,200 Israelis, but then every day later, since 5 months now into this war, an average of 200 Palestinians were killed daily. So the level of anger on both sides are very high. But I decided to go to Kfar Aza and give my condolences. It's an apology to Israelis. It's a recognition of responsibility. Whatever has happened on the 7th of October is on the shoulders of me, any other Palestinian, whether it has been done by hands of Hamas or civilians, or maybe sometimes friendly fire, but we have called for that day. So, somebody from a Palestinian side. So I went there and I made that condolences and I made that apology, regardless the fact that I was only 1 kilometer away from Gaza, the city that was totally destroyed, where a Palestinian kid loses his life every 6 minutes. But I didn't want to make the comparisons, because I felt that on a personal level, on a national level, we have a duty to stand against what happened on the 7th of October. And then I leave for an Israeli the chance to come one day to the city of Gaza and say, we need to apologize and give our condolences. But my obligation was on my side of the problem at that day and at that moment.
So, Samer, let's just look. It's very good. I'm sure that you did this, but of course you don't represent, of course, Hamas, and you also don't represent those people within the Palestinian Authority. And unfortunately, there are quite a number of them who have certainly not apologized or felt bad for October 7th, and some of them have welcomed it. You represent a different strand of Palestinian thinking. How to move forward so that your strand of Palestinian thinking is the strand that not just rules, but also educates younger people in Gaza, the West Bank, and so on. How to move there? I mean, do you support, I'm not asking you if you support the deaths of anyone in Gaza, but do you support the removal of Hamas as the governing power in Gaza by Israel? Or, I mean, it'd be better if they just resigned, of course.
Well, Tom, there are several questions in your question, and I will try to answer them. First of all, well, yes, maybe I am the only Palestinian now that stood up publicly and condemned the 7th of October, but I am a mainstream Palestinian. I am a political activist, and I took this step and I created a debate inside the Palestinian society, and it is a very, very healthy debate. Taking into consideration that none of the Israelis up till now stood against the war that is taking place in Gaza. So in a way or another, we are still on this level of taking responsibility. We are a step ahead. I still wish and feel it's very important that somebody mainstream in Israel also start recognizing that there are war crimes committed by Israel in Gaza. To change this moral collapse on both sides, we need to be able to start creating, pushing for a leadership on both sides that understands its moral responsibility and that adapts to new strategies. For me, the Palestinian strategy should be a strategy that puts at its basis the security of the Israelis out of national interest from a Palestinian point of view. If I will not be able to fulfill the security needs of the Israelis, I will be able to go nowhere. And for Israelis, their strategy should be based on providing the well-being, human dignity, and national aspirations for Palestinians. These strategies go together and will help achieving the results for both nations. We need to revise our education system. And when I say our, it means Palestinian and Israelis. We need to revise the media. Maybe we will find inside the Palestinian education system 70% incitement and hatred, obvious in the textbooks, but I'm sure we will find inside the Israeli education system maybe less percentage of hatred and incitement, maybe not in the textbooks, but in the environment of the classroom. We need to fight hatred and incitement. It's becoming deep inside both people. And whatever will happen in the war in Gaza, we will discover again, both Palestinians and Israelis, that again, we are 7 million Israelis, 7 million Palestinians living together in the same place, and we will continue to live together in the same place, and we need to find a way to coexist. So whatever happens in this war will not change this reality. So I'm sure that the Palestinians are fed up from both Hamas and Abbas. It's not that they are fan of Abbas and only are tired from Hamas. The Palestinians in the West Bank are fed up from the corruption that Abbas brought to them. And the Palestinians in Gaza are fed up from the destruction that Hamas brought to them. Both Palestinians in West Bank and Gaza, they are looking for an alternative that will bring construction to the Palestinian people. A leadership that will be able to give the Palestinian the feeling that when he wakes up every morning, he starts feeling that this is going to be a better day, because now we woke up and we are sure that today is worse than yesterday.
So let me ask you, there is an imbalance. There are many imbalances between Israeli and Palestinian society, but one of them that's got nothing to do with Israel or Palestine, it's just a fact of a political system, and you could apply it elsewhere in the world, is that Israel's a democracy. Now, democracies are not perfect at all. They have many problems, but in general, they are better than dictatorships. And they involve change of governments and change of leaderships. So in the Palestinian leadership, since the advent of the PLO in 1964, there have only been two leaders, Yasser Arafat and then Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen. In Israel, I've lost count of how many elections they've had and how many prime ministers. It's true that Netanyahu has been there rather too long, but in general, in any democracy, there are changes of governments and so on. And also, again, you're right, the Israeli media is not perfect, but it's relatively open and vibrant and so on. So in the past, is what I'm thinking, is you have a situation where someone who was quite a hardline person, like Menachem Begin, the Likud right-wing prime minister way back in 1977 when he came to power, having come in from a nationalistic right-wing point of view. Anwar Sadat, the Egyptian president, reached out with peace, and Begin responded in a positive way, and Israel and Egypt have a peace agreement now for a long time. The point being that if Begin had not reached out to Sadat's overtures of peace, he probably would have lost power within the Israeli election system. The problem with, I think, the problem with not having a democracy or not having an open media is that in the past, when the Palestinians have been offered an independent state, it may not have been everything the Palestinians aspired to or even deserved, but it was nevertheless an offer of an independent state, most famously to Yasser Arafat by Bill Clinton and Ehud Barak in the year 2000, I think it was, Camp David. And I'm not sure that the Palestinian population ever had a chance to really respond to that in a kind of vote, because maybe if everything was explained, they would have voted yes. Let's accept this offer. It's not everything. There'll still be matters for negotiation. But Arafat never put it to a vote. And later on, Ehud Olmert, another Israeli prime minister, made another offer of statehood to Mahmoud Abbas in 2008. And there have been other times too. Even the plan of Donald Trump, which was not necessarily a good plan for the Palestinians, but nevertheless, it was the basis for an independent state. And if I was the Palestinian leadership, I would have accepted it in principle and then negotiated lots of points to make it better from a Palestinian point of view, rather than just reject it outright. My question being is how to achieve a Palestinian leadership that next time there's a proposal on the table, it's actually properly debated in an open way within the Palestinian political discourse, allowing people maybe to have a vote on it, maybe a referendum in Palestinian society, and so on and so on. Because I'm a firm believer that if you look at other peoples in the world that want a state that don't have one, like, I don't know, in Tibet or Kurdistan, or there are many peoples actually, they may not, if they were offered 80, 90% of what they were demanding or wanted, I think they would accept it, even if it's not 100%. And the problem for the Palestinians is they never had a chance really to debate or respond to those offers, even with a counter offer, even if it's not acceptable. So I'm just wondering how we get there. And I'm going to say one more question that makes it even more complicated for you. I know that we've spoken about Mohammed Dahlan, the exiled Fatah leader who's now in United Arab Emirates. We've also spoken about Marwan Barghouti, another Fatah leader who's in prison in Israel. Are either of those people that, you know, if there's an offer later between Israelis and Palestinians, they will maybe accept it, even if it's not perfect?
Well, I do agree with you that we Palestinians have suffered from lack of leadership. And it has been for a long time, for maybe 100 years. We have never had leadership, not during the times of Haj Amin al-Husseini, during the British Mandate, not during the time of Arafat or Abbas. So in the last 100 years, we have only 3 leaders altogether. And apparently everyone stays for more than 3 to 4 decades each time he takes and assumes leadership. And And this is why maybe if we compare us with the Israelis, before 100 years, we were both militias fighting the British mandate. Now Israel is a OCED country, and we still in a phase of did not reach to statehood. Maybe more in a militia style of organizing ourselves. So we have a lack of leadership. And I really don't understand why Mahmoud Abbas rejected the offer of Olmert. It was a very good offer. It was acceptable. You know, nothing is perfect for the Palestinians, taking into consideration that they have only left with 22% of the land, and still on this 22% of the land, they need to negotiate and make a lot of compromises. But I think we could survive with it. Why did he turn it down? I'm not sure. I can't find reasons for this. Why doesn't he respect, especially Mahmoud Abbas, the will of his people, the need for democracy? It's a lot of criticism that we have against him. I wrote an op-ed in New York Times in 21 of December under the title Mahmoud Abbas Must Go, and I explained why. And I explained what we have received from his regime. But we don't have a lot of tools to change leadership, unfortunately. Now Mahmoud Abbas is more than a dictatorship, more than an authoritarian regime. I really don't find in the books of political science a term that can really describe him. I think he created his own term of Abbasism. He is representing a small autonomy authority, the weakest in the world, but he assumes the most power possible on the surface of earth. Technically, in the amount of power he seizes, he's more powerful than the Chinese president or Putin, because he holds the legislative power, the executive power, the judicial power, the media, the money, the diplomacy, everything is in his hands. And if a Palestinian leadership will not show an example that he respects the rights of his people internally, he doesn't have the agency to represent these rights in front of the others. How can a person that is oppressing his people can claim that he wants to negotiate the rights in front of the Israelis? I can't believe it will work. So that's why 90% of the Palestinians are asking him to leave. How will this happen? I'm not sure that we alone can determine this. Abbas himself was appointed by the Americans, by Condoleezza Rice and Bush in 2002. They forced him over Arafat, and they forced Arafat to deliver all his powers to him. So now, because of the war in Gaza, and since the Palestinian people are not allowed or are not able to do elections until we bring life to Gaza, I think what should be done now, the Palestinians are requesting from the international community to push Abbas to accept to transfer his power to a decent, non-corrupt, transparent, accountable prime minister that can reunite the Palestinians together, geographically, the Gaza with the West Bank, and nationally, all the functions. And then this prime minister and his government, for an inter period of 2 to 3 years, can bring the Palestinians, first of all, to solve and unlock the catastrophe that is happening now in Gaza, reconstruct Gaza, and organize elections in 3 years when life is back to Gaza. But this, we cannot do it again alone. We need everybody to help, because now the issue is not local. The issue is now regional stability. There is on the horizons a possibility now that the Saudis come to the table, that we, again, you've mentioned correctly the case of Sadat and Begin. I think now the new Sadat for today could be MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. if he comes to the Knesset and address the Israeli people, there will be totally different dynamics inside the Israeli society. I think most of the Israelis would sign in for an option where there will be a permanent peace in the Middle East. But for this, we need a change of Palestinian leadership. Without it, there are three sides of a triangle that are preventing any movement towards a political horizon. It was Hamas, Abbas, and Netanyahu. These type of regimes and leadership are taking both Israelis and Palestinians as hostages in their bunkers for years. I agree with you that we have missed all the possibilities possible before 2009 in accepting some kind of a deal. But after 2009, it was Netanyahu who's blocking any horizons for a peace accord between Palestinians and Israelis. So this leadership should disappear. And I think the Israelis are aware and are working into it. So we need to find a way of how the international community will help a change of leadership on the Palestinian sides. And then when we have new leaders on both sides, I think the Middle East will be a totally different Middle East.
Yes, very interesting. Let me ask you just one. We don't have too much time, but I'll ask you also about the role of the world, of the international community. On the one hand, the international community can be very important for helping resolving conflicts. We've seen that in some other conflicts in the world, I don't know, East Timor and so on. There are various places in the world where the UN or international community have been helpful. But I'm also a believer that sometimes there's a phrase in English, too many cooks spoil the broth, spoil the food. Like if there are too many people sticking their noses in with this plan and this plan and this plan, in the end, as you're doing, Israelis and Palestinians have to accept one another. As you say, no one's going away. Maybe in the longer term, there can be kind of open borders. We see in Europe today, you know, Germany invaded France 3 times, starting in 1870, then in World War I, then in World War II. No one could imagine that a generation or two later, there were totally open borders between France and Germany, and in fact, throughout Europe. After a war, the Second World War and First World War, that was much bigger than any other war in the world, much, much bigger. So no one can imagine that, you know, the peoples of Europe are basically united today. So first of all, of course, one needs maybe 2 states, but afterwards there can be open borders and good relations, not just Israelis and Palestinians, but in the whole region, in fact. My question is the international community kind of useful? Or sometimes I feel they treat the Israeli-Palestinian conflict like some kind of football, like some kind of Roman gladiator competition where they enjoy Israelis and Palestinians fighting it out. And they don't really want to solve the conflict. They just throw ideas here and there and whatever. So sorry to not give you much time, but just as a last thought, how can the international community help in a positive way or actually help resolve the conflict?
Well, I'm not a fan of the international community. I think the international community is, especially the West, USA, UK, and EU, they are hypocritic, especially when they come to looking into the Middle East conflict. And I think the Middle East should be able to solve its own problem by its own self. We don't really expect the others to solve the problems. They can be catalysts. Okay, the Americans are important. UK is important with its historical relation. EU, whether as a payer or as a player. But we should be able to push things. The dynamics should come from the Middle East. And that's why now I see all the stars aligning. The Saudis are willing to be part of a deal. The Arab countries now, all the Arab countries are very sincere and they want to integrate Israel in the Middle East and they want full cooperation. They want very warm peace. They want to, but they want to see the Palestinian issue solved. So we need to listen very carefully to the Saudis and we need to believe them. When they say Palestinian state on the borders of 67, East Jerusalem is its capital, they mean it. And they mean it more now.
Yes.
So So we need to create the dynamics internally, and then we can invite the international community to give a push into this. Like now, I've mentioned, we need the international community to push the change in leadership on the Palestinian side. But the dynamics now are building up from the Middle East itself, and
Yeah.
it will help. It will help the international community to interfere. As a Palestinian, I would tell you that I believe the political horizon will never come via Washington or via London. For me, as a Palestinian, the political horizon will come only via Tel Aviv. If I will be able to work things directly with the Israelis, if as a Palestinian I will be able to touch the minds on the hearts of the Israelis, I will find a way out. So we need to focus on engaging with the Israelis. And since we don't have a lot of time, it needs to be a top-down process. We need to start engaging political elites from both sides. And when they have trust, they will be able to sort things out. And then we invite the others. But waiting for the American president, there has been never a president generous to the Israelis like Biden. And he is not able to push a shipment of American flour to enter Ashdod port and go to Gaza. So zero diplomatic effect on Israel, although he's giving everything possible to Israel from military support and diplomatic support, but he is not able to affect their decisions, especially Netanyahu. So this is a lesson for all of us. We need to sort things directly, and then when it is needed, we ask the help of the others.
So, Samer, I don't agree with everything you've said today, but by and large, I agree with your general outlook. And also, I'd say that the Abraham Accords were largely negotiated directly between Israel and the Arab parties. Maybe the White House, the Trump administration, provided a place to sign a ceremony, but they were made in the Middle East. And likewise, an Israeli-Palestinian peace or reconciliation agreement will be made in the region. And, I'm, in spite of everything, also an optimist. I think deep down, most people realize that the other side is not going away, and people have to find a way to live for everyone's sake and the sake of the next generations in good relations. So, and I think, out of every crisis can come something good in the end. So, like you, I'm cautiously optimistic, though it will take time and it's not going to happen overnight.
Yes, let's stay optimistic.
Yes. So thank you very much for being with me today, and speak to you again soon, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.